I have been so excited lately because I've been personally accomplishing so much in the space of fashion technology that I just had to take some time and be like, wow, I'm really becoming the type of person that no matter the circumstance, I just have to dedicate to getting things done. And that makes me feel really good. What also has been making me feel really good lately is just everywhere I look up now, everything is fashion technology. And I feel, yes, I think it's a beautiful thing. I've been in this space for over 10 years. And I think what I've learned is you absolutely don't want to be first, but you want to be the best. And if you're too early, it doesn't matter because there's so many types of technology that came too early and now they don't exist anymore. And now there's so many people who are smart enough to take advantage of the time and carve out a niche and they'll last a long time. And I think it's really an awesome time to be in fashion tech because to me, fashion technology is the merging of the ideas that things can exist in a dichotomy. Things can exist in a dialectic way, which is many years ago when I created my first company, Luxor and Finch. It was all about that women could exist in these dualities that may seem unnatural in a sense, but they make sense when they exist at the same time. And so the idea of Luxor came from when I lived in Luxor, Egypt, and I had my entire world rocked by the culture, the people, my experiences there. And then the idea of a finch was supposed to be a juxtaposition against everything that Luxor stood for. So Luxor, if you think about the Egyptian pyramids, they're made out of granite. They're so solid. They're stone. They're ancient. They're deep. They have these amazing cultural roots. They're very hard. It's a substance. It's earthy. And then a finch is something very small, light as a feather almost. And so Luxor and Finch was originally a clothing boutique online. Before Instagram stores was connected to Shopify through Facebook and made life easy, Luxor and Finch was like my baby. And so now when I'm seeing fashion and technology combined, I think it's creating a space for people who can think on both sides. And you can be sexy, you can be smart. Those things don't have to be separate. Things can be stylish and things can be efficient. Things can be abundant and have wealth and not be wasteful or cannibalistic. And I think to me, that is what fashion technology is about. So my name is Jessica Couch. I'm a fashion and technology expert, and I go to conferences and do research that you don't have to. And so I'm excited about fashion tech. And it does feel like I'm like starting this out on a rant, but really we're going to piece it all together with the industry because what I do really well is break down tough information and make it bite-sized so that people can understand it. Because what I learned, well, my mom told me, keep it simple, stupid, KISS, KISS, right? You can sound really intelligent by saying big words and making everything sound complicated, but I think true intelligence is being able to communicate effectively with whoever your audience is. And I was taught that early. That's how I learned how to write. My mom taught me that. That's how I learned how to speak. So I like to take that perspective into this industry. And there's a ton of analysts. There's a ton of people who maybe only know the tech side or the data side. But if you cannot take that information and make it relevant, what is the purpose? And so that's kind of where I stand in this industry. Is like, I've been here long enough to understand the things that are going to shape, the things that are not. I'm not saying I know everything. Obviously, I do not. But my perspective is to take what is existing and make it easy to digest. And so that is why I'm like, you should, shameless plug, subscribe to my newsletter, Fashion Technology 101, because my goal is to make technology easy for the designers, for retailers, for brands, and then also help tech companies understand how to get to their customer. And I do think I'm in a perfect position to do so because I've worked on both sides. And I think that working on both sides, you become an outsider to both. And so you belong in neither. So you become really good at bridging, but you always kind of exist on the outside. And I'm okay with that because that allows me to have perspective, that allows me not to be biased. And I think that it's just interesting. For my own personal story, thanks, Ice Maker. When I started out in the industry, I thought I was going to be a designer. That was my dream. My aunt taught me how to sew. So I was obsessed with design. But what I realized early on was I was not obsessed with sewing at all. And I was like, man, everybody who's a designer has to sew. I don't want to sew, this, that, and the third. I wish it was an easier way. I think at the end of the day, I chose to double down in the industry that I was curious in and then to expand from that. And I also like to think that my experience had relevancy to other people, because if I had a hard time with pattern making, wanting to design but not wanting to sew, how many other people had it? And so when I started out, I guess you're farther ahead than what you think, because perhaps things that are discomforts to you or desires that you have could be scaled for many other people if other customers are having that. And so my whole perspective on fashion technology comes from my own personal experiences with the understanding that these are shared experiences and then my desire to make things smarter, faster, and better. Now, this could be because I'm obsessed with efficiency. I hate inefficiency. And I remember being in design rooms and watching and seeing how long it took to do fittings, to get information from the fitting, to write it down, to change patterns, to ship it to China, to physically ship it to China, to wait for it to come back, for the sample to be wrong, to make corrections, to have to ship it back. All that stuff took time. And I was like, there's got to be an easier way. And even when I owned a store, I remember thinking there's got to be a better, faster way to like, scale this. And so I say all that to say that is still how I view fashion technology, from the lens of being a student, from the lens of experience, from the lens of thinking, can we make this better for the people using it? So whether that's people working in companies or people buying products, how do we match people to product and make it better? That is my obsession. That's my perspective. And so as I see things in the industry happening, I'm really amazed by it. I'm absolutely thrilled to see that fashion technology has so many tags, so many people into it, so many stories, so many people asking, how do I get into fashion tech? But most importantly, I think what we have to focus, well, what I focus on, how do we get more technology integrated in a way that makes sense and not just in a gimmicky way? Because one thing I did notice is 10 years ago, when technology first came out, it was a whole lot of gimmicks. It was just like, it was a whole lot of people in the space that were raising funds because of the schools they went to. And VCs are, no offense, and I hope no VC that wants to support me ever sees this, but they're not most innovative people. Like high-end gambling, and they're trying to figure out what has the lowest risk, highest reward so we can exit. And so with that kind of understanding, things get funded that really are like, why would you fund that knowing that we have this problem to solve? But it's not always about solving problems. It's sometimes about making money. That's what I am not going to bore you with the story about me. I'm excited about some things happening in the industry, but there's also some conversations that needs to be had. So if you haven't been paying attention, this whole thing with tariffs is now backtracking. And the Supreme Court ruled previous rulings around tariff were unconstitutional and that they shouldn't have been put in place, which sounds like great, because if you didn't notice, those tariffs definitely hit your pocket. It definitely made things more expensive than what they needed to be. It made your packages sit at a port before you could get them. And it messed up our relationships with China. But now you can sue and say, hey, you shouldn't have charged me all those tariffs. Now, that's great for companies because perhaps they have the legal team to go and sue, win their cases, and win some of that money back. Allegedly, I know a couple companies are suing. We'll see how that pans out. Well, what about for the consumer, right? What about the fact that you just paid so much money for products that had no reason to be that cost? There was no extra quality, nothing special. You just paid a tax just because, right? Very frustrating. Well, there's nothing that a consumer can really do around it because consumer protection laws don't seem to be as tight under this administration. And this is no political commentary. I don't care who's in office. I always feel like that the person or the consumer is always at the bottom end of the totem pole. Yeah, me. All right, I'll hit you in 30 minutes. Right. So let's go back to tariffs. So basically, companies are going to be able to sue to recoup some of that money that they lost, but you won't be recouping for the money that you spent. However, could this have been avoided? Not sure. Nobody really knows. It's a very unpredictable political climate. But to avoid this in the future, I do think that technology integration across the supply chain is probably some of the better things to do. Now, I know that there is Refashion Ventures, and what they do really well is invest their money in credible, wonderful solution providing companies across the supply chain to make things like sourcing and all of the things that went wrong that affected the tariffs easier. So I definitely think that this is a place where fashion technology can create less friction, right? Because if you can do trend forecasting better, if you have better sourcing, and if you can digitize this part of the industry that is so subject to the flux of political laws, then we can probably put the consumer first. Now, it is in my opinion that the best technology is putting the consumer first. The best technology is making it easier for shoppers and customers to do what they love, matching people to products. So that's always going to be my angle when it comes to my judgments and analysis around fashion technology. I do think proper technology in place can also help fashion be a little more agile when it comes to political turmoil. We are subject to economic changes, so voting with your dollar and how people want to spend is going to fluctuate. But having a supply chain that cannot be negatively impacted by political nonsense probably is a great place to try and invest more money in technology in this space. I don't see relationships in foreign countries getting better. So I do think that brands should think about what their supply chain looks like, where the gaps are, and how technology can fix that. And I'm sure they're already thinking about it. So this just kind of sounds like, oh, I told you so, whatever. And we don't always talk about supply chain technology as much, but it absolutely exists. Forecasting technologies like Quid exist so that you can use data in a better way and aggregate your information and make the best possible guess on what to do next. And I think that's going to be important. See, in this way that brands have to just get smarter, retailers have to get smarter, because customers are still not going to rock with you if you get it wrong. Customers are not going to rock with you if you overcharge them. Yes, you'll have loyal customers, but you have these customers that are kind of in between, the ones that cost more money to retain, to go and find. Those customers are a little more finicky, right? They're not going to be your die-hard customers, but they are customers that you want to win over and give them a good experience. And it's kind of unfair. How can you control an experience where you're taking on the brunt end of unfair tariffs? But to pass that cost along to your consumer and then get it exposed, it's probably not going to be a good look. So figuring out that profit maximization over people maximization isn't always the way to go. You don't have to choose one of the or the other. That's the thing about dialectic thinking that we even started talking about. You can both maximize your profit by maximizing the customer experience, maximizing people, and optimizing your supply chain. Who would have thought? This is the type of thinking that is in existence now thanks to fashion technology, right? And these are the type of thinkers that fashion technology requires, are people that understand both sides. Yes, the industry has been ran a certain way all of this time. Yes, it has to be about profit. Yes, you have a board that you have to answer to. You have investors. You might have gone public. You have shareholders. You have all of these people that are going to constantly pressure you to make money. Where I'm not saying don't make money. That would be dumb. We're all in this to sustain ourselves. You just don't have to make money at the expense of the person spending their dollar with your company. I promise you that these things can exist at the same time. I know it sounds crazy. And no, it's not about socialism. I told you I'm not really here for the political conversations. I'm just here to talk about why fashion tech even exists, the type of people that are pushing this forward, and the type of thinking that is necessary to help fashion tech make the biggest difference ever, which is creating more efficiencies in an inefficient, very interesting industry. And I loved the fashion industry until I absolutely did not love it anymore. And I think that's why tech saved me. When I made the decision to go on the tech side, it was because how long can you really look at inefficiencies? How long can you be in these design rooms? How long can you watch people make mindless decisions that aren't based in numbers or in any type of structural thinking? It's just like, this is what we've always done. This is what we're going to do. For me, that just did not work. And this is what kind of pushed me into the fashion technology space, because is there a way that you can have flyness? Things that absolutely make you speechless. Clothing that's like, oh my God, if I could just put that on, words can't even describe how this would make me feel. Can that exist and also have efficiencies around how it was made, where it was produced, and how it got to your customer? The answer is absolutely yes. But what's taken the industry so long? Well, to the defense of legacy brands, it is not easy implementing new things, right? You can easily get them wrong. And some of these companies are so big, asking them to stop, be innovative for real, somebody to own that innovation, teach people the innovation, make sure people aren't afraid of the new technologies, new phraseology, not let tech bros come in and a sea of just sleeveless vests take over your company and make it weird, sell it out to private equity. All of these decisions can be tough because running corporations and then being efficient and innovative at the same time is really hard to do. No matter what brands are saying about how innovative their materials are, which maybe they are, how innovative their designs are, I don't knock that. When it comes to internal innovation, a lot of brands and retailers struggle no matter what their size is, because it's just hard to implement something this new, behemoth, to these organizations that are so large that they're like, dare I say, inflated. And that doesn't mean, to have innovation, you have to fire people. Nope, that's not what we're saying at all. Let's stay away from that altogether, because we're not talking about technology replacing people and getting rid of people. We're just talking about what does it take to properly integrate a technological tool and make it successful. Take a look at Prada. Prada is a super legacy brand, right? And of course, they're spread out all over the world, although it may seem like Prada is just centralized in Italy. They produce in some places, sell in other places. Marketing could be in another place. Design teams could be somewhere else. That's what I mean when I say spread out. Now, Prada had a very interesting fashion tech faux pas that shocked me so much, because I'm like, how can a company that makes this type of money, that has this type of prestige, make this type of mistake? But then again, these mistakes happen. Now, the mistake that I'm talking about is Prada decided to implement a personalization tool that's not really new, because if you were around for Nike ID, when Nike allowed you to design your own shoes and then they sent it to you within a reasonable time, they had a supply chain that worked, and they had something that people responded really well to. Nike ID was awesome. Personalization is awesome. It's a big task to take on, but when it works, it absolutely works. When it doesn't, you get what happened to Prada. So Prada put up a personalization tool, and somehow when the products got to people, it wasn't at all what they had designed, which means somehow there was a technology that collected what a person wanted to do, sent that data somewhere. That data went to put together the shoe so that it could match what the person wanted. Another piece of data went to make sure that that information was correct. Another piece of data went to make sure that the person received their product. And somehow through that breakdown, people got the wrong stuff. Now, this may sound small, but this is a big faux pas for a company like that, because none of that had to exist. But I say that, and I gave you that example simply to say, even some of the greatest companies, the bigger companies, these luxury companies, don't get it right, because it's not always about the tool itself. Sometimes it's about the implementation. And I'm so serious about why implementation is so important. I made this entire framework about how to properly implement it. The framework is based on tech principles that I learned as a product manager and through design thinking, which is equally as important. The purpose is really, one, what problem does it solve, right? Who said they had the problem? How do we answer that problem? And then how do we test, learn, and repeat? So in this example, product probably needed to better, and let's not forget, within that, who is going to own this innovation? That's really important. That's a part of the framework. In this example, it seemed like Prada didn't really have the right people in place to own this new technology and to troubleshoot in the test, learn, and repeat phase. Now, this phase is super important because before you roll anything out to actual people and get their feedback, you are supposed to test, learn, and repeat yourselves internally with smaller groups so that you can avoid massive disappointment. That's just one example of what's happening. Now, we could speculate around why this occurred. Maybe they didn't have the right personnel. Maybe they thought the technology served itself and could just be an end-all be-all. But as I've said before, technology alone cannot answer the problems that are in fashion, and it's not going to create a better experience for your customer. It has to be a combination of having the right personnel, the right implementation, the right undertakings internally, the right ownership internally. Fucking train. As well as the right ownership internally. So if that's something that interests you and you're like, oh my gosh, I want technology, but we're afraid, we don't want to make mistakes. Big companies make mistakes. Little companies make mistakes. You can get over a mistake when it's small. It's kind of harder when it's larger and you're on a bigger scale. If that interests you, we do have a framework and you can always either request it or you can go online and get it. It's totally up to you. Or you can flounder and be like Prada. Now, I'm not trying to come down on Prada because a lot of companies get a lot of stuff wrong. I know you've been paying attention to how people respond to Gen AI. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes when companies don't say, hey, this is AI, people get really angry. Sometimes when they do, they like it. It's kind of iffy, right? You'd really have to know your customer so well before you try to implement any technology. Who would have thought that knowing your customer before you try to implement something could absolutely save you from being embarrassed? I don't know. One of my principles that I think about, but to everyone else just rushing to integrate any type of technology, Godspeed to you. But this is also why I decided to create the Fashion Tech Directory, because I have a set of knowledge that I can only talk to one person at a time. I can only be on stage so much. I can only show up at conferences and events so much telling people the same thing. So instead, I created the directory to kind of bridge the gap. And I'm really bridging the gap between tech companies who really do have cool solutions and maybe they don't market them well, or maybe they're not getting in front of the right people, or maybe people are super annoyed by cold calls or cold emails or these chat GPT-based pitches that we all know the cadence of, and it's kind of annoying to read and it's totally made email marketing a very weird place. But the goal is if they do have a solution that's comprehensive, I'm vetting them, my team's vetting them, and we're basing it on our customer-centric principles, as well as some very proprietary ways of selecting. And then we're bridging that with brands and retailers who actually have problems, who are needing solutions that are not too complicated, that are not going to make them lose their job. But also what I noticed, I wanted to market this to people. I wanted this to get to the people who actually have to use the tools. Because what I noticed is that at conferences and at trade shows, you get executives or you get people that are familiar with these conferences and trade shows, but you don't always get the people there to actually have to use the tools. And so sometimes there's a gap, there's an education gap, there's an intimidation factor. There's so much technology. And if you're really busy doing your job and you don't have time to look at fashion technology 101 or all these other amazing blogs and publications that are talking about tech, you could definitely feel overwhelmed when someone's saying, we need a new technology. Not only that, but again, someone has to own it in the organization. And if you're the person that has to own it and you don't have time to learn it, the directory is a better way to just talk to our agent who understands your pain points and needs and can match you with a technology like a really good dating service that actually works and doesn't just cycle you through people who are afraid to reach out once you match. This is not like this at all. You can actually reach out to the technology companies once you feel like they meet all of your needs. So no more scrolling through long pages of tech companies that are just totally irrelevant for you. This is just like, hey, these are my pain points. This is the size of our company. This is what we're dealing with. What do you have for me? Because that's how fast fashion moves internally. It's a very fast-paced business. You don't really have time to sit and listen to all these pitches. And I think that's what tech companies get wrong is fashion is such a unique place. That's why the technology integration piece has to be unique as well. These are not other industries where there's just utilitarian type thinking. There's hedonic thinking. There's utilitarian thinking. That means in our industry, in fashion, some things are purely emotional and not quantifiable in the same way that it would be if you're selling something like kitchen appliances, right? Everyone has to cook. You either have to get this dishwasher or that dishwasher or this coffee maker or that one. With fashion, it's not like a have to for everybody. It's a whole lot of feeling. It's a whole lot of unjustified idealization and things that can't always be put into words. And so you have to quantify that. You have to really understand those personas before you can just go and feel like you can market any tool to the fashion industry, because the people that use it are also the people that are in the industry and having these same emotional hangups about products that go on your body. So it's kind of a complicated place, but it's a place that has to be respected. I think that when you have this genre of tech bro culture trying to come in, using all these numbers and jargon that's not familiar, you're not making it easy for the people that have to use it to understanding. And you're also coming in assuming that you're better or that your solution is so much better than all the other ones similar to you. That attitude does not work in this industry, because not only do people have to like you, they have to adopt your tool and they have to utilize it. So the more complicated it is to do that, the less likely they're going to use that. And that's not just internally, that's what customers too. The more complicated your technology is, the less like a normal shopping behavior, the less likely it is for people to actually adopt it. Now, my principles around tech creation, tech adoption, and tech implementation, again, are all based on customer centricity. You got to do what's best for your customer based on your observations of your customer, listening to your customer, and properly identifying what type of customers you have before you ever go and get a technology. That is just the bottom line. Even companies like Prada get it wrong. Even publications that are really major get it wrong. And while some companies can get things wrong and keep trying because they have the money, they have the market share, everyone doesn't have that luxury. So also knowing where you are is super important in this industry. Now, I definitely think that now that fashion tech is not something weird that people are like, what is that? And how does technology work in fashion? But it's okay. Let me take that back, because there are people that still ask me that. And it's like, check out some of the articles or check out some of the tech tools, because it's way too broad for me to just always narrow it down to something that people want to hear. It's its own industry now, which is exciting. But at the same time, we have to have some parameters around how to make it work. And so for myself, my greatest goal is to bridge the gap between tech and brands and retailers so that we can make things work with the customer right in the center, in the middle, being great. And that's it. That's my spiel. That is what fashion technology, that is what I'm excited the most about fashion technology. And I definitely think that fashion schools now have to get serious about implementing technology into their curriculum, because one of the things that we don't want to see, and I cannot say this enough, is we don't need outsiders coming in thinking that they're making solutions for an industry that they don't understand. One of the really big problems I saw years ago when VCs were funding companies that didn't make it and don't exist anymore because they didn't really solve a problem is that you had people coming in from these other industries who thought they could solve a problem in fashion. They've never shopped for themselves. They've never even been in a fitting room, and they've never spent time with the customer. And while that sounds absolutely crazy, it happens every day. It happens all the time because people are like, oh, you know what? I can solve that problem. I think what's more important is to understand that people that are in the industry, in luxury, in fashion, could you believe that they could do both? Could you both be stylish and smart, intelligent and sexy, appealing, and also witty? God forbid those things exist, y'all. It's 2026. It's a lot crazier things happening than the fact that the fashion industry can absolutely educate its own people to take on some of these roles and positions in the industry as it relates to innovation. And now I'm going to also share this with you. I have a couple of friends that are seasoned product developers and designers, and you would think with their tenure that they would be inside of these companies and be in high demand, but they're not. And what they're actually seeing is that a lot of companies are realizing that, one, we don't want to pay you probably what you're worth. If it was any other industry and you have 10, 12 years worth of experience, you would have a salary that reflects that. What we're learning is that what some companies are doing are saying, what we'll do instead is bring in these younger kids we can pay less, train them up, and then we'll add in technology. That is going to be a recipe for disaster, and I'll tell you why. Number one, there are nuances of understanding that happen within 12 years of experience that does not exist in someone who's starting out. Now, that should be obvious because experience is the number one thing that people claim you need on your resume in order to get a job. And yet, if you keep giving these design jobs to people who don't have that experience, it will negatively impact your design. And that is why if you start seeing that brands start producing things that look lame, plain, uneventful, unexciting, like everybody else, you have to think about what's going on internally. Now, the last video I did, I also talked about how lame it is to overuse Gen AI for design when there's no thought or intention behind it. Gen AI cannot replace designers. Can it enhance what designers are doing? Yes. Can it make it easier to get design inspiration? Yes. But to think that it will replace design, I don't know. Now, I made some assumptions around the Kith and Matrix collection. I'm going to stand on business on those. That looks absolutely like they put that into ChatGPT and said, hey, we have a licensing deal. Give me a collection that's easy, costs under this much to make, that I can sell for this much, and voila. But you'd have to watch my last video to really go in depth about that. Now, what I didn't mention in that last video is that companies like 7-Eleven did a capsule collection, well thought out, very dope, because I think they use actual designers. I say all that to say we could not get so far away from the point of design where we're not honoring the designers who have put in that work and who understand the nuances of why one cuff is going to look different, why one seam can make a difference, why different materials can change your costing altogether, and why a fit issue could be solved with an invisible dart. Something that simple is what you're missing when you're bringing in these new talent, combining it with tech, and both of those things are inexperienced and don't have enough data to pull off. Now, I'm not going to rant too much about this because we'll talk about this in further videos, but I did want to say, if you're here watching my video, I am so grateful for you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for giving me feedback because it lets me know I'm not just speaking into an echo chamber. Although if I did, I'd be okay with it. I'm super passionate about fashion technology, but I want to get you as equally passionate. And my gift to you are the things that I'm creating. Looks is launching in Shopify, which means peer-to-peer fashion discovery based on size and fit is coming for you. And I'm working really hard to get that out, probably by the end of this week. And I just won a grant for it. So that's going to be even better. And then on top of that, you have the Fashion Tech Directory. You have Fashion Technology one-on-one newsletters. So if you're really interested about fashion technology, I want you to follow me and follow who I follow, because I do follow some really awesome publications and really awesome people in my ecosystem that are also covering fashion technology and retail. So make sure you tune in. Give me your thoughts. Give me your likes, subscribes, thumbs ups, whatever. You can even say wild stuff in the comments. I'm okay with that because I got something for you too if you try me. But anyway, I hope you stay tuned in. Let me know what your thoughts are about how fashion technology is changing. Make sure you keep liking my videos, sharing it with your fashion tech friends, and staying tuned for what's happening in the industry, because we do have some awesome events coming up this summer that you need to be at. Thanks so much.